Before we begin, I must warn you, this is not a story of romance. It is a story of shadows. What you are about to hear will question everything you believe about love, passion, and destiny. Do not listen lightly. These words are not meant to comfort, but to uncover the danger hidden in the fire of desire. If you choose to stay, stay with open eye, because once you enter, you may never look at love the same way. Now, descend. Love. The word itself glows with, in its light, we imagine safety, intimacy, transcendence. But Jung knew a secret few dare to utter. The more intense the love, the greater the danger. The passion that lifts us can also drown us. The same fire that warms can burn until nothing remains but ash. Modern studies echo this truth. Couples who describe their relationships as all-consuming report rates of conflict, violence, and collapse nearly twice as high as those who describe them as calm. The intensity we crave is also the abyss we fear. Jung wrote that love is never only personal. It awakens archetypes buried deep in the psyche, summoning gods older than memory. When two people fall into one another with feverish devotion, they are not only lovers, they are actors in a drama scripted by the unconscious. They embody the archetypes of anima and animus, of hero and temptress, of savior and destroyer. And when these forces are unleashed, love ceases to be gentle. It becomes possession. A patient once described to Jung her first encounter with a man she swore was her destiny. She spoke of the electricity in his gaze, the magnetism of his voice, the way her body trembled as if she had known him for centuries. Within weeks, she abandoned her home, her children, her name. She insisted it was fate, intuition, the universe conspiring. Yet the man soon revealed himself violent, controlling, jealous beyond measure. She confessed through tears that even as he struck her, she felt she could not leave, as though invisible chains bound her to him. Jung explained that she was not simply in love. She was ensnared by an archetype. Her unconscious projected its deepest yearnings onto this, making him godlike. And like all gods, he demanded sacrifice. Modern science validates Jung's terror. Neuroscience reveals that intense romantic attraction activates the same reward circuits as addiction. Dopamine surges, oxytocin binds, cortisol floods the body with stress. Lovers in such states exhibit withdrawal symptoms when apart, cravings when ignored, obsession when threatened. Psychologists call it limerence, a trance-like state where the beloved becomes idol, obsession, drug. What feels like destiny is biology and archetype conspiring to enslave the soul. But this truth is older than. In Greek myth, Paris and Helen's passion ignited a war that consumed Troy, their love both irresistible and catastrophic. In Christianity, Samson's devotion to Delilah blinded him, both literally and spiritually. In Buddhism, attachment itself is described as the root of suffering, binding the heart with chains disguised as intimacy. Every tradition whispers the same warning. The more intense the love, the darker the shadow it casts. The warning signs flicker like candles before a storm. The way lovers lose themselves in one another's eyes, forgetting the world. The compulsion to answer every call, to obey every demand, to surrender every boundary. The smile that hides desperation, the silence that follows obsession. Each sign is a step deeper into the fire, a moment closer to ruin. The stages of destructive love unfold like a tragic play. First, intoxication, the spark that feels divine, irresistible, absolute. Next, surrender. The self dissolves, individuality erased in the name of passion. Then, domination, jealousy, control, violence creep in, disguised as proof of devotion. Finally, destruction. The love that once promised salvation delivers only collapse of identity, of safety, of soul. Jung described this as enantiodromia, the reversal of all things. The highest ecstasy flips into its opposite. Joy mutates into horror. And this is not confined to individuals. Families collapse under the weight of forbidden love. Communities fracture when passion overrides reason. Nations descend into conflict when leaders are intoxicated by destructive bonds. alliances forged in obsession rather than. Jung warned that the archetype of Eros, when unleashed without consciousness, sweeps through groups as easily as through hearts. The fire does not care whether it consumes two lovers or an entire city. What, then, is the survival protocol? Jung's answer was ruthless: consciousness as shield. To see through the intoxication, to question the compulsion, to confront the archetype without surrendering to it. Love must be integrated with awareness, or it becomes a tyrant. He urged patients to remember, the beloved is human, not God. The passion is archetypal, not destiny. Without this awareness, one is dragged into the fire, smiling even as the flames consume. The climax of this truth is devastating, to realize that the most beautiful moments of love may also be the most dangerous. That intensity is not proof of depth, but often a mask of possession. That the same heart that trembles with devotion may soon tremble with fear. Jung's hidden warning: beware the love that feels like it may be the shadow calling you into it. So I ask you, when you stand before the fire of passion, trembling with certainty that you have found destiny, will you recognize whether it is love that redeems or love that destroys? We dream of soulmates, the one face in a crowd that feels inevitable, the one touch that feels eternal. But Jung warned that this vision often hides a mask. The soulmate we think we recognize is frequently nothing more than our own unconscious reflected back at us. We do not meet destiny, we meet our shadow. And the more certain we feel, the more dangerous the illusion becomes. One of Jung's patients, a man in his 40s, told him of a woman he met at a gathering. The moment their eyes locked, he said, "I knew." He felt as if the universe had bent time itself to unite them. He abandoned his career, his entire life. At first, the passion was a storm of ecstasy, but soon suspicion crept in. Jealousy raged, violence erupted. The woman he thought was his salvation became his tormentor, and he hers. They were not soul mates. They were shadows colliding, two unconscious wounds entangled in obsession. Jung described it soberly. He did not find his missing half. He found his projection. Modern science uncovers this. Neuroscientists studying love at first sight find that the brain floods with dopamine and norepinephrine, producing euphoria indistinguishable from drug intoxication. Psychologists show that we project idealized qualities onto new partners, blind to contradiction, sculpting them into the soulmate we want them to be. What feels like cosmic recognition is often just the psyche mistaking fantasy for truth. Yet myths and scriptures echo this caution. In Greek legend, Narcissus fell in love not with another, but with his own reflection, drowning in the illusion of recognition. In Christianity, warnings abound against idols, images mistaken for divinity. In Buddhism, attachment to appearances is condemned as the surest path to suffering. Across traditions, the message is clear. The soulmate mask is not salvation, but seduction. The warning signs are haunting if you know how to see them. The instant conviction that this is the one, without evidence, the compulsive drive to merge lives overnight, to dissolve boundaries before trust has formed, the blindness to flaws, the silence around contradictions, the desperate refusal to see red flags. Each sign is a step deeper into projection's trap, each a stitch in the mask tightening over the beloved's face. The stages of this deception unfold with cruel symmetry. First, recognition, the lightning flash of certainty. Next, idealization. The other is exalted, worshipped, stripped of humanity. Then, disillusion. Reality breaks through, flaws appear, conflicts erupt. Finally, collapse. The soulmate becomes the enemy. The dream becomes nightmare. Jung called this the enantiodromia of relationships, the reversal of opposites, where devotion mutates into destruction. But this deception is not confined to individuals. Families collapse when one member abandons everything for a true love that turns toxic. Communities fracture when they romanticize perfect unions, enforcing impossible standards that breed resentment. Nations themselves have idolized leaders as soulmates of destiny, only to discover tyranny behind the mask. Jung warned that when the archetype of the soulmate is unleashed collectively, the result is possession, crowds mistaking projection for what then is the defense? Jung urged the cultivation of ruthless awareness, to strip away the mask, to see the beloved as human rather than archetype, to recognize projection before it enslaves. The meeting of two personalities, he wrote, is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation is not always salvation. Sometimes it is fire. Consciousness alone can prevent the fire from consuming both. The climax is merciless, to admit that what feels like destiny may be nothing more than fantasy, that the soulmate we worship is often our shadow in disguise, and that love, when born of projection, carries the seeds of collapse within its very act. Jung's hidden warning was this: beware the love that feels like recognition. It may not be your other half. It may be the half of yourself you never dared to. So I ask you, when you look into the eyes of the one who feels inevitable, do you see them, or only the mask your soul has crafted to deceive you? Love begins, a glance, a touch, a word that ignites a fire in the chest. At first, the flames feel liberating, warmth, energy, destiny. But Jung warned that passion, unchecked, is not liberation. It is bondage. The fire that seems to free us becomes the chain that imprisons us, and the more intense the flame, the stronger the chain. One patient recounted to Jung the fever of his affair. He described nights that felt eternal, as if the world outside no longer existed. I could not eat, I could not sleep. All I wanted was her voice, her body, her presence. Without her, I felt hollow. Yet as months passed, the sweetness turned bitter. Jealousy grew, obsession deepened. Anger replaced tenderness. He confessed with a trembling voice, I love her, but I hate her. I need her, but I want to flee. Jung told him that he was no longer in love. He was possessed. The archetype of Eros had chained him, and the chains glittered so brightly he mistook them for gold. Modern psychology describes the same phenomenon. Studies show that intense romantic passion activates the brain's addiction pathway. Releasing dopamine creates cravings indistinguishable from drug dependence. Neuroscience reveals withdrawal symptoms when lovers are separated. Anxiety, depression, even physical. What feels like love is often addiction by another name. The chains of passion are not metaphorical. They are chemical, biological, archetypal. The ancients understood these chains long before laboratories measured them. In Greek myth, Medea bound herself to Jason with devotion so fierce it turned murderous, her passion consuming not only her enemies but her own children. In Christianity, warnings against lust, obsession were woven into Scripture, for they saw how passion enslaves the soul. In Buddhism, desire itself is described as the root of bondage, a wheel of craving that turns endlessly, trapping those who mistake fire for light. The warning signs of passion's chilling. The inability to think of anything, the sudden isolation from friends, family, and obligation, the desperate need to answer every call, to prove loyalty with every gesture, to surrender boundaries without thought, the smile that hides terror, the silence that follows arguments that feel like death. These are not signs of healthy love. They are shackles tightening link by link. The stages of this imprisonment follow a relentless order. First, intoxication. The passion feels divine. The world pales before its brightness. Next, dependence. The beloved becomes oxygen, and separation feels like suffocation. Then, control. Jealousy and fear invade, each partner grasping, manipulating, demanding. Finally, collapse. The fire consumes the bond, leaving behind ashes of resentment and despair. Jung called this the shadow of Eros, love's destructive double, hidden within its And when these chains extend beyond individuals, they bind entire groups, families destroyed by affairs they could not resist, communities fractured by forbidden passions, scandals spreading like contagion, nations entangled in alliances forged not by reason, but by obsession, collapsing under betrayals that were inevitable. Jung warned that the archetype of passion, once unleashed collectively, moves like a plague. It spreads, it binds, it devours. What defense exists against such chains? Jung's counsel was ruthless clarity. Passion must be faced with conscience, integrated with reason, anchored in reality. Love must allow space, breath, imperfection. Otherwise, It is not love, but bondage. No tree, he wrote, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. To love consciously is to face the shadow in passion, to recognize the chain before it locks. The climax of this truth is haunting. To realize that what feels like the highest freedom may be the most exquisite prison. That passion, worshipped as proof of destiny, may be nothing more than addiction with a prettier name. That lovers who swear they cannot live without each other may not be proclaiming devotion, they may be confessing enslavement. Jung's hidden warning was this: beware the passion that feels irresistible. Its fire may not warm you, it may chain you until you burn alive. So I ask you, are you in love, or are you already wearing the chains of passion, mistaking bondage for destiny? Love whispers of union, to merge, to dissolve, to become one with the beloved. It is the oldest dream, the promise of completeness. But Jung warned that union pursued possession. What begins as intimacy mutates in control. The beloved ceases to be human. They become object, property, extension of the, and possession is the death of love. A patient once told him of the way his partner's presence intoxicated him. He wanted her laughter, her silence, her every breath. At first, she was flattered, even grateful, but soon the weight grew unbearable. He demanded to know where she was at every moment, whom she spoke to, what she thought. He read her letters, searched her belongings, questioned her as if she were a criminal. He insisted it was love, proof of devotion. Yet when she finally left him, he sat before Jung and whispered, "I didn't want her love, I wanted her soul." Jung told him the truth he could not bear to hear. You were not loving her. You were consuming her. Modern science validates this transformation. Psychologists studying obsessive relational intrusion describe how passion warps into control. Neuroscience shows that the same reward pathways involved in addiction drive jealousy and monitoring behaviors, flooding the brain with stress hormones when the lover becomes a prisoner of their own biology, their intuition convinced that possession is protection. But protection is only another name for domination. Ancient wisdom knew this danger. In Greek myth, Hades did not woo Persephone. He abducted her, consuming her freedom in the name of desire. In Christianity, the commandment against coveting is not only about possessions, but about people, warning that love twisted into ownership is sin. In Buddhism, clinging to the beloved is described as one of the deepest chains of samsara, binding souls in cycles of suffering. The ancients saw what modern minds forget. The beloved is not yours to possess. The signs of possession are chilling. The insistence on constant contact, the fury at imagined betrayals, the demand for exclusivity, not of love but of thought, of time, of identity, the smile that conceals suspicion, the touch that feels like a chain. Each scene is not intimacy, it is captivity dressed as devotion. The stages of possession unfold like a tightening vice. First, fascination. The beloved is adored, exalted. Next, obsession. The need for their presence becomes unquenchable. Then control, monitoring, questioning, restricting. Finally, annihilation. The beloved, suffocated, either flees or collapses into silence. Jung saw this annihilation as the ultimate betrayal of love, for in trying to own the other, one destroys the very soul that made them lovable. And possession does not end with couples. Families possess children, demanding obedience in the name of love. Communities possess individuals, punishing deviation as betrayal. Nations possess citizens, insisting on devotion that erases individuality. Jung warned of this archetypal pattern. What begins as belonging becomes bondage. What begins as love becomes tyranny. What is the protocol of survival? Jung's counsel was sharp. Boundaries, consciousness as shield, limit as weapon, withdrawal as strategy. To love another without seeking to possess them is rare, but necessary. Love must be freedom, or it is not love. It is hunger. He urged lovers to confront the shadow in themselves, to ask whether their desire to protect was truly fear of loss, whether their devotion was only the mask control. The climax of this truth is haunting, to realize that what we call love may be nothing more than possession, that the vow, "I cannot live without you," romantic, it may be a confession of tyranny, that the arms we mistake for embrace may in fact. Jung's secret, beware the. It is not the soul seeking union, it is the shadow seeking control. So I ask you, when you hold the one you love, is it truly an embrace, or are your hands already tightening around a prisoner? Love promises tenderness, but when it mutates into obsession, tenderness becomes cruelty. Jung warned that the shadow of love is violence, sometimes subtle, sometimes brutal, but always born of the same fire. Desire, when twisted by fear of loss or hunger for possession, becomes a weapon. The one we claim to cherish becomes the one we harm. And in this paradox lies the darkest truth. The most passionate lovers are often the most dangerous. One patient told Jung the story of his marriage, a union so intense that it seemed forged by destiny. "We fought like fire and water," every argument ended in screams, every silence in suspicion. He struck her once, then wept in remorse. She, in turn, clawed his face during a quarrel, then begged for forgiveness. Both swore it was love, proof of devotion, the intensity of their passion. But Jung told them bluntly, "You are not in love, you are at war. And war does not end in embrace, it ends in ruin." Modern psychology confirms this grim transformation. Studies reveal that relationships marked by extreme passion are statistically more likely to involve verbal abuse, physical violence, and cycles of reconciliation that only deepen the bond. Neuroscience shows that the same circuits that fuel desire also ignite aggression, especially when threatened with separation. The beloved becomes both the drug and the trigger. What feels like intimacy is often an alternating current of ecstasy and brutality. Ancient wisdom foresaw this. In Greek myth, the love of Medea for Jason turned murderous, leading her to slay even her own children. In Christianity, stories of Samson and Delilah show love entwined with betrayal, strength corrupted into destruction. In Buddhism, attachment is described as the seed of violence. For what we cling to, we also fear to lose, and fear breeds aggression. Love, across tradition, is never far from wrath. The warning signs of desire's violence unfold like scenes from a thriller. The argument that escalates too quickly, voices sharp as knives, the sudden silence that drips with menace, the apologies drowned in tears, followed by promises of eternity, the bruises explained away as accidents, the neighbors who hear screams behind closed doors. Each moment is not passion. It is the shadow of love sharpening its claws. The stages of this descent are merciless. First, friction, arguments that feel alive, intense, electric. Next, escalation. Words become weapons, jealousy becomes interrogation. Then, eruption. Violence bursts, physical or psychological, leaving scars both visible and unseen. Finally, reconciliation, the violence cloaked in apologies, gifts, tears, until the cycle Jung recognized as archetype repetition, eros entwined with thanatos, love bound to death. And when this violence spreads beyond couples, its devastation families scarred by generations of abusive passion, communities fractured by honor killings, by vendettas fueled by obsession, nations torn apart by leaders who confuse devotion with domination, their love for country expressed in wars of annihilation. Jung feared such collective possession. When the shadow of love is unleashed, it destroys not just individuals, but entire history. What, then, is the protocol of survival? Jung's counsel was brutal. Break the cycle. Consciousness must expose violence for what it is, not devotion, not passion, not proof of love. Boundaries must be drawn like lines of survival. Immediate withdrawal, refusal of reconciliation when it masks abuse, recognition that true love liberates, but false love imprisons and harms. He told patients, "If love wounds more than it heals, it is not love. It is shadow demanding blood." The climax of this truth is devastating. To realize that the arms, once seen as sanctuary, may become shackles, that the mouth once pressed in kisses may spit poison, that the heart once exalted as destiny may beat only with rage. Jung's hidden warning was this: beware the love that erupts in violence. It does not prove depth, it proves possession. and possession always ends in destruction. So I ask you, when passion burns too hot, when arguments leave scars, when apologies are drowned in tears, are you truly in love, or are you already at war, marching hand in hand toward ruin? Love is supposed to expand the soul, to give wings, to open doors. Yet the most intense loves do the opposite. They build walls, they tighten chains, they transform passion into prison. Jung warned that dependency, masquerading as love, is among the most dangerous forms. The lover believes they are cherished, but in truth, they are trapped. A woman once sat across from Jung with trembling hands. She described her partner as the center of her existence. She could not sleep without his voice, could not eat his presence. When he traveled, she lived in panic. "I cannot breathe without him," she confessed, her eyes wide, both terrified and adoring. Jung answered with chilling calm, "Then you no longer love him. You worship him, and worship is always imprisonment." She wept because she knew it was true. Modern science reveals this prison with stark clarity. Psychologists studying codependency describe how individuals lose identity, autonomy, and even physical health in relationships that consume them. Neuroscience shows that the brain rewires itself under prolonged attachment, suppressing circuits of independence while strengthening those of reliance. In extreme cases, the separation of partners triggers symptoms akin to withdrawal, like those seen in addicts deprived of their drug. Dependency feels like devotion, but it corrodes the soul until nothing remains but need. Ancient wisdom told of this prison. In Greek myth, Orpheus descended into the underworld for Eurydice, unable to live without her, only to lose her forever. In Christianity, the golden calf represents worship turned to slavery, the illusion of love transformed into idolatry. In Buddhism, clinging is the most dangerous chain, for the tighter we hold, the more certain we are to suffer when loss arrives. The ancients saw clearly, love that denies freedom is not love, it is captivity. The warning signs of dependency are chillingly cinematic. The lover who checks the clock obsessively, panicking when the beloved is late. The silence of a room when the partner is absent felt like suffocation. The sudden isolation from friends and family. Every bond cut to serve the one. The trembling fear at the thought of abandonment. The pleading voice that whispers, "Don't leave me. I am nothing without you." These moments feel romantic in the beginning, but they are shadows tightening into bars. The stages of dependency unfold with dreadful predictability. First, enchantment. The beloved becomes the center, the sun around which everything orbits. Next, erosion. Individuality fades, hobbies, passions, friendships dissolve. Then, captivity. Fear of loss dominates. Every action revolves around keeping the other close. Finally, collapse. The self disintegrates, identity erased, life consumed. Jung feared this collapse above all, for once the self is lost, recovery is a slow resurrection, and when dependency spreads to collectives, its destruction magnified. Families built on dependency crush individuality, demanding sacrifice in the name of loyalty. Communities enforce suffocating ties, punishing those who dare to walk alone. Nations breed citizens into dependency, feeding them illusions of protection while chaining them in control. Jung called this collective dependency psychic enslavement, a form of possession that spreads not through one couple, but through entire societies. What defense exists against this prison? Jung's answer was uncompromising: individuation, the creation of a self strong enough to love without losing itself. Boundaries must be erected like walls, identity preserved as shield, freedom demanded as. He taught that true love does not erase the self, it awakens it. Consciousness unlocks the bars of allowing love to without the climax of to realize that may be nothing more, that what feels like safety, the tightening, that what feels eternal may be captivity that suffocates the soul. Jung's hidden warning was this: beware the love that erases you. It does not redeem, it imprisons. And prisons, no matter how beautiful, are still cages. So I ask you, in your most intimate bond, are you truly free, or are you living behind invisible bars, calling your chains by the name of love? Love does not remain confined to two hearts. When it is pure, it radiates outward, nourishing families, inspiring communities, even shaping nations. But when it is destructive, it spreads like... Jung warned that the shadow of love is contagious. What begins as obsession between two can infect everyone around them. The fire does not stop at the lovers' bodies. It leaps into their homes, their children, their societies. One patient came to Jung describing parents whose passion consumed them. Their fight shook the house. Their reconciliations erupted into feverish embraces. Their silences cut deeper than... I grew up in the shadow of their love. It was too big for them, and it devoured us all. He confessed that even as an adult, he could not form a relationship without repeating the same cycle: intensity, conflict, collapse. Jung told him that children inherit not only the love of their parents, but also its shadow. Passion becomes legacy. Obsession becomes curse. Modern psychology confirms this cycle. Studies show that children raised in homes of high conflict passion are more likely to replicate destructive relationships in adulthood. Neuroscience reveals that stress hormones released during parental fights alter a child's developing brain, wiring them for anxiety, hypervigilance, and unstable attachment. The poison is not only emotional, it is biological, etched into the nervous system. The shadow of love becomes a contagion across generations. Ancient wisdom warned of this ripple effect. In Greek myth, the curse of the house of Atreus passed through generations, each love entangled with betrayal, vengeance, and blood. In Christianity, the sins of the fathers are said to echo through children, love twisted into generational chains. In Buddhism, karma itself represents the ripple of choices and attachment, spreading endless. Love's shadow is never private. It stains the world it touches. The warning signs of contagion are terrifying. The child who trembles when voices rise, no blow is struck. The sibling who takes sides in parental wars, carrying guilt as if it were armor. The family gatherings where silence hangs heavy, each smile brittle, each laugh forced. The way neighbors whisper about the house where love sounds like screams through the walls. Each scene is not isolated passion, it is infection spreading outward. The stages of this contagion unfold with dreadful order. First, ignition. Passion erupts between lovers, intoxicating and blinding. Next, leakage. Their conflict and obsession spill into the family, shaping the lives. Then, inheritance. Children internalize the pattern, repeating it in their own bonds. Finally, epidemic. The shadow of destructive love ripples through communities, families, and even nations. Jung called this collective possession, the moment when private shadows infect the collective unconscious. Indeed, when destructive love grips entire societies, its devastation is immense. Communities sanctify jealousy as honor, control as devotion, violence as proof of loyalty. Nations exalt destructive bonds to leaders, mistaking submission for patriotism, passion for destiny. Wars have been fought under the intoxication of collective love, twisted into obsession with purity or homeland. Jung saw these epidemics as proof that the shadow of love is never limited to bedrooms. It shapes history itself. What is the protocol against such contagion? Jung's answer was consciousness at the collective level. Families must speak the unspoken, shatter the silence, confront the cycle rather than transmit it. Communities must question traditions that sanctify suffering in the name of love. Nations must resist archetypal intoxication, refusing to worship leaders as beloved saviors. Awareness must spread faster than shadow, or else love's poison will devour everything in its path. The climax of this truth is chilling. To realize that destructive love is not only the ruin of two souls, but the undoing of entire generations, that the shadow of passion passes from heart to heart like an inheritance of fire, that without confrontation, families, communities, nations burn under a flame that should have warmed, but instead consumed. Jung's hidden warning was this: beware the love that feels too big to contain. Its shadow does not end with you. It infects all who live in its smoke. So I ask you, what legacy of love do you carry? Is it a fire that warms, or a contagion that devours the generations after you? Love is not only personal, it is archetypal. Behind every kiss, every embrace, every quarrel, lurk figures older than humanity, gods, myths, shadows that repeat themselves through us. Jung taught that when love becomes too intense, it ceases to be a bond between two humans. It becomes possession by archetype, and possession always ends in fire. A woman once came to Jung describing her marriage as if it were an ancient tragedy. She believed she was fated to save her husband from his demons, to sacrifice herself for his redemption. She spoke of him as both God and beast, angel and tormentor. Her eyes glowed with a zeal that frightened Jung. She was not seeing her husband. She was seeing an archetype, beauty chained to the beast, Persephone bound to Hades. She was no longer living her own story. She was acting in a myth that demanded suffering. Jung wrote in his notes, "She is possessed by the archetype of the Redeemer, and it will destroy her." Modern psychology confirms this. Research in attachment theory shows that individuals caught in destructive relationships often assume archetypal roles: savior and victim, pursuer and distancer, master and slave. Neuroscience reveals that these roles activate deep brain circuits tied to survival, flooding the body with adrenaline and dopamine, making escape nearly impossible. Archetypes are not metaphors. They are psychic forces that seize the body as well as the soul. Ancient wisdom told these same stories. In Greek tragedy, Helen of Troy was not only a woman, she was the archetype of desire, and her passion burned cities. In Christianity, the archetype of the martyr sanctified suffering and love, often leading believers to embrace torment as sacred. In Buddhism, the archetype of attachment manifests as Mara, the demon who binds seekers with illusions of eternal union. Myths across cultures testify, when archetypes rule love, catastrophe follows. The warning signs of archetypal possession are unmistakable if one dares to see them. Lovers speak as if they are destined, chosen, marked by fate. They describe their union in cosmic terms. As if the universe itself bends around their passion, they accept suffering as proof of devotion, violence as sacrifice, jealousy as evidence of depth. Their love is no longer human. It has become myth, playing itself out flesh. The stages of this possession unfold like a ritual. First, exaltation. The lovers feel chosen, larger than life. Next, submission. Individuality dissolves. Each becomes an actor. Then, sacrifice. Freedom, peace, even safety are surrendered to the drama. Finally, conflagration. The myth demands blood, and the lovers find themselves destroyed in the fire they mistook for destiny. Jung called this psychic inflation, when humans mistake themselves for archetypes, swollen with forces too vast to contain. And this archetypal fire is not confined to lovers. It leaps into families, communities, nations. Couples exalt themselves as saviors, dragging their children into myths of sacrifice. Communities sanctify destructive unions, glorifying martyrdom as proof of love. Nations project archetypes onto leaders and enemies, waging wars not for reason or passion disguised as destiny. Jung warned that when Eros possesses a collective, the result is always destruction. History itself becomes a battlefield of myths. What is the survival protocol? Jung's counsel was stark. Recognize strip it of its mask, and confront the human beneath. Love must remain human, or it becomes divine in the most dangerous sense. To say, he is not Hades, she is not Persephone, we are not saviors, not martyrs, not myths, we are flawed souls seeking union. Consciousness must wrestle myth back into symbol, or else love becomes theater of destruction. The climax of this truth is terrifying. To realize that what feels cosmic may be nothing more than archetypal possession, that what feels destined may be the shadow of myths demanding sacrifice, that the fire burning between two people may not be theirs at all. It may belong to gods who demand blood. Jung's hidden warning was this: beware the love that feels larger than life. It is rarely human, it is archetype in flames. So I ask you, when your love feels cosmic, are you truly living your own story? Are you only playing a role written by forces that do not care if you survive? Every destructive love follows it is not random chaos. It is a slow descent, a ritual of ruin that repeats with merciless. Jung called this process enantiodromia. The turning of things into their opposite begins in ecstasy, ends in despair. What begins in union ends in. The intensity that first felt like destiny inevitably mutates into collapse. A patient once told Jung of the rhythm of her marriage. She described the first months as heaven, laughter that filled the air, passion that devoured nights, promises whispered, but slowly suspicions. Arguments sharpened, silences lengthened. She began to feel more alone in his arms than she ever had in solitude. Finally, she confessed with tears, "I live in ruins and I don't know when the walls fell." Jung explained that she was not alone. Many loves collapse not in explosions but in slow erosion, stones falling one by one until nothing remains but dust. Modern psychology maps this anatomy with precision. Researchers identify predictable stages in destructive relationships: idealization, devaluation, conflict, collapse. Neuroscience shows that the same circuits that fuel obsession eventually exhaust themselves, draining dopamine, leaving emptiness where ecstasy once lived. The brain that once burned with passion becomes hollow with despair. Collapse is not an accident. It is written into the biology of obsession itself. The ancients also traced this arc. In Greek myth, the love of Paris and Helen began with irresistible beauty, but ended with Troy reduced. In Christianity, the story of Samson and Delilah begins with desire, but ends with blindness and ruin. In Buddhism, attachment is always doomed to collapse, for impermanence makes loss inevitable. Across cultures, the anatomy of collapse has always been known. Love that burns devours itself. The warning signs of flicker like dying candles. The laughter that no longer feels free. The embrace that is colder than absent. The silence after arguments that no apology can soften. The creeping sense that joy is gone, but fear remains. These are not random moments. They are milestones in the anatomy of collapse, markers along the road to ruin. The stages unfold with cruel inevitability. First, intoxication. Passion floods the soul, intoxicating and blinding. Next, erosion. Trust frays, doubt spreads, small betrayals accumulate. Then, inversion. Love mutates into resentment, desire into suspicion, intimacy into hostility. Finally, collapse. The bond shatters, sometimes in silence, sometimes in violence, leaving both parties broken, haunted by the ghost of what once felt divine. Jung taught that this collapse is not failure. It is transformation, the shadow claiming its price. And collapse rarely ends with the love. Families are dragged into the ruins, children scarred by the falling walls. Communities whisper of scandal, choosing sides, dividing loyalties. Nations, too, collapse under the intoxication of destructive bonds. Alliances born of obsession shatter into betrayal. Wars ignite when passion becomes suspicion. Jung warned that the anatomy of collapse plays out not only in bedrooms, but in history itself. What defense exists against this inevitable ruin? Jung's answer was harsh: awareness, to see the stages unfolding and act before the final collapse, to recognize erosion when it begins, to confront suspicion before it consumes, to refuse the inversion of love into hatred, to separate rather than shatter, to retreat strategically rather than burn in the rubble. He called this act individuation, the courage to step out of possession before collapse devours everything. The climax of this truth is devastating, to realize that collapse is not an exception, but a law. That intense love carries within it the blueprint of its own ruin. That passion, unchecked, is destined to fall. Jung's hidden warning was this: love that feels like a storm will always end in silence, and the silence will be colder than death. So I ask you, in your most intense bond, can you hear the stones already loosening in the walls? And when the collapse comes, will you be buried beneath it, or will you walk away before the ruins fall? Every story of destructive love ends the same way, not with firework, not with divine revelation. It ends in silence, a silence heavy as stone, echoing louder than screams. Jung understood this silence not as but as aftermath, the haunted quiet that follows when Eros, the god of love, has devoured everything he touched. A patient once sat in Jung's study, her hands motionless in her lap. She had left the man who had been her passion, her tormentor, her obsession. I thought when it ended I would feel free. Instead I feel nothing, as if my soul has been hollowed out. Jung leaned forward and told her the truth. You are hearing the silence that comes when the shadow has fed. This is not emptiness. It is the soil in which something new must grow. Yet she trembled, for silence feels like death before it feels like rebirth. Modern psychology confirms this eerie finale. After the collapse of toxic passion, individuals often experience symptoms akin to trauma, dissociation, numbness, the sense of being hollow. Neuroscience shows that the brain, after long addiction to the chemicals of obsession, struggles to regulate itself, leaving withdrawal and emptiness. The silence is not a void. It is the nervous system recalibrating after fire. But to those who endure it, it feels like the end of life. Ancient stories foresaw this final quiet. In Greek myth, after the war for Helen, Troy lay in ashes, no music, no voices, only silence where once desire had burned. In Christianity, after the crucifixion, there was a day of stillness, a tomb sealed in quiet darkness. In Buddhism, silence is both danger and gateway, the emptiness that must be crossed each awakening. Across traditions, silence follows passion. The warning signs of this silence are haunting. A house once filled with voices now echoing, a bed where two once tangled, now cold, sheets untouched, photographs face down, music avoided, memories too sharp to touch. The silence is not only around, it is inside, an emptiness that echoes with every. The stages of this ending are inexorable. First, collapse. The bond shatters, leaving fragments. Next, withdrawal. The body aches for the absence of the other, craving the poison it once called love. Then, numbness, silence within, silence with a vacuum that feels eternal. Finally, stability, the faint stirring of something new, if the silence is endured rather than. Jung told his patients that the silence, though unbearable, is the only space where individuation begins. But silence is not confined to individuals. Families scarred by destructive love fall into years of unspoken wounds, generations trapped in quiet resentment. Communities fractured by scandal live in whispers, the silence of things no one dares name. Nations recovering from collective obsessions stumble through decades of ruins, their histories echoing with what cannot be spoken aloud. Jung saw in these silences both the danger of repression and the seed of renewal. Only when the silence is faced can a new voice emerge. What, then, is the final protocol? Jung's counsel was stark. Endure the silence. Do not flee it. Do not numb it. Do not rush to fill it with another passion. Let the shadow speak in the quiet. Let the soul grow roots in the darkness. Consciousness is the only light that can illuminate the silence without shattering it. He warned, do not mistake silence for death. It is the womb of transformation. The climax of this truth is chilling, yet profound. To realize that every destructive love ends in silence, but silence is not the end. It is the threshold. It is the abyss one must cross to reclaim the self from the ruins. Jung's final warning was this: love that destroys will leave you hollow, but if you face the hollow without fear, you may discover a wholeness no passion could ever give. So I leave you with this final question. When the fire of love has burned you to ash, will you flee the silence, or will you dare to sit within it until the shadow speaks and the self is born anew?